It's time now for a weekly segment. Scott, you got the floor. It's the Fantasy Football Insider. So far, you've given us some great insight on running backs and quarterbacks. You've got a little bit of the unsung heroes in fantasy football this week, I think. So give us some inside information because these drafts are now really starting to ramp up through the month of August.
Yeah, like you said, we covered the quarterbacks and the running backs. So obviously, the next logical position is defense and kickers. The thing everyone loves to draft when it comes to fantasy. And one very interesting thing is if you look at fantasy over the past 7, 8, 9 years, the difference between your best defense and your 12th defense, and you figure there's 12 teams in the league, so 12th defense is kind of like your replacement level is average about 40 points. It's sometimes as high as like 50 or 60 points. So there's a pretty big drop. That's kind of like the drop from Gronkowski next to like the third or fourth tight end. And a lot of people draft Gronkowski, first round, early second because of that huge drop. So there's a big drop in defense, and that top one or two defenses can really carry your team. And so every year, if you've been in fantasy football drafts long enough, you'll always see that one or two. There's one or two owners who come around 7 or 8, they draft that defense from last year. Someone's going to do it this year with Denver. Someone did it last year in your league, probably with Seattle. The year before. Someone's always drafting that team because there is that big difference. And so the question is that really worth it? Since there is such a big drop from that top defense down to what you're going to get if you kind of wait till last round, is is it worth when everyone kind of laughs and everyone's like, oh my gosh, you drafted them early? Short answer is no. Long answer is no. There's just no reason to be drafting a defense before the very end of your draft. And the reasons for that are if you look at the year after year to year change. So you look at everyone's always chasing last year's points, and I think that was something I mentioned with the quarterbacks last week. That's you know so you look at from 2008, 2009, from 9 to 10, so on. You look at from last year to this year, and this year, what's projected in 2016. One interesting statistic is only 41% of last year's top 10 defenses will finish this year in the top 10. And on average, the team that finished first as the defense, so Denver last year, Seattle the year before, those number one top, the ones that the guy's always drafting, in the middle, that one guy's taking them in around 6, 7, 8. Uh, their average finish the next year is the 10th best defense. And even if they're a good actual defense in the NFL, they always fall. And the number two defense, so I think last year was Arizona or Carolina. So someone's going to be drafting them high. Their average finish the next year is 12th. And so why are these teams dropping or these defenses dropping so much? And it's because defenses are carried by defensive touchdowns. The pick sixes, the punt return, the kick returns, and for a while, teams were your savvy owners were like, "Oh, I'm drafting Chicago because they have Devin Hester. I'm drafting the Browns because they have Josh Cribbs, and I'm going to get that defensive touchdown." And you just can't predict those. I mean, if you look back at history, a team will get. I think Kansas City is a great example. They went from like the 18th defense to number one or two, and the next year went to like number 30th because they just had a lot of fumble returns for touchdowns that year. And the next year, everyone reached for them really high, and you just can't repeat it. And so as far as defenses, that's kind of the big things I just wanted to point out is when it comes, if you're kind of tempted, just don't be that guy. Don't be that guy that's like, I'm going to outthink the rest of the league. I'm going to grab, Denver, Carolina. And they're granted, there's the chance they might have a repeat year. The odds are horribly low. The odds are much more likely they're not even going to be a top 10. And you look at those teams, I think Arizona had a lot of returns for touchdowns. Denver lost Peyton Manning, so they're probably going to struggle, be giving up a lot more points. And so the best thing to do is just kind of, look for a solid defense, a team that seems to not give up a lot of points, maybe has some good sacks, and just, see who's there in the last round, second last round. But yeah, just don't be crazy when it comes to defenses.
And look for teams.
Kickers. Sorry. Go
Go
ahead.
for it. Oh yeah.
Um, and the other thing I also mentioned was the kickers, the other one that people like to talk about. The whole idea kickers are people too. And in fantasy, yeah, they kind of are. They're a necessity. You have to have them, even if it's Nugent. You have to have your kicker. Um, and kind of the same thing with defenses. The difference between the top kicker and that 11th, 12th kicker, the one that kind of replacement one, if you kind of wait and just stream kickers during the year, there is a drop. It's averages like 30 points a year between the best one and the others. So like Gostkowski, or years ago it was Vinatieri, and there's always that that top kicker, and someone's always going to reach for that kicker. Usually a round or two before everyone else. And one interesting thing I looked up. I was kind of curious. Well, how do you determine who a good kicker is for fantasy? How do you project? And a very interesting statistic that I came up with. So I'm going to patent this or coin it, or I don't know, whatever, trademark it. Is that on average, kickers score about 1.7 points per kick attempt. So that's extra point attempts and field goal attempts. I don't know why that is. That just historically over the last 7 to 9 years, that's just what it seems to be. So with that in mind, you want a guy who's going to make a lot of attempts kicking the ball. Field goals are very fluky. You had someone like I think it was Cairo for Kansas City last year had like 5 or 6 field goals in a game. I think Rob Baronis one year had 6 or 7 field goals in a game. You just have no way of knowing that stuff's going to happen unless you have a direct line to like the patron saint of fantasy football. You're really not going to be able to project that. So you just need to realize you're not going to be able to. It's like day trading. I mean, some people can do it. I think a lot of us probably can't. So the big thing with the kickers is look for a team that's going to move the ball, because the more they can move the ball offensively, the more yards they get. And there actually is some sort of correlation there without putting all the statistics on the podcast. The more a team is able to move the ball in yardage-wise, the more kick attempts they get. And the more kick attempts they get, the more, times that 1.7 points per kick attempt, the more points they get. You can look at field goal accuracy. That plays a little bit. It doesn't really seem to affect it a whole lot, because if you're a bad kicker, you're just going to get cuts. You're not going to get points anyway. So the big thing with kickers is just look at a team that seems to move the ball. And so everyone usually does that. They take the high scoring guys like Gostkowski because New England moves the ball. They have a good offense. When Peyton Manning was with the Colts, the Colts kicker was always a big one. When Peyton Manning was with the Broncos, the Denver's kicker was. So just kind of keep in mind who are the offenses you think are going to be good at moving the ball this year, and target their kicker. There's no reason not to wait for a last round. There's not going to be a whole lot of difference. You're really not going to know. No one really expected Carolina to move the ball as well as they did. Their kicker, Gano, was really good last year. The kicker for Arizona was really good because their offense was on fire. So yeah, just kind of wait, kind of chill out, wait till last round, see which good offense's kicker is still there, and then scoop him. So that'd be my advice. Hopefully it works, and if it doesn't, then
I'm with you, Scott. But man, you got to take Gostkowski early, man. Last year I took him in like round 7, and you don't realize how great a kicker is, like having one of the top 5 kickers, until you actually see, oh my gosh, he's getting me 12 points every week or whatever it happens to be. And if you don't draft Gostkowski high, don't draft anyone high, because like you said, they're all going to be there at the end of the draft. And very good chance there's going to be a top 5 kicker available on waivers within the first 4 weeks. And the same can be said with defense. And one thing I just want to say really quick is Cincinnati, I think, has had 20-plus picks in each of the past 3 years. Whether it's Cincinnati or another team that you trust, take a team that has put up consistent statistics. Whether it's, like Scott said, I think pick sixes play a big part in a team having a good year as a defense special teams, but I think a team also that puts up consistent numbers, whether in sacks or picks or forced fumbles, whatever it is, those are pretty good teams to target. But yeah, like Scott said, don't draft either one too high unless you're taking Gostkowski, in my opinion.
Well, and that's the interesting thing. You mentioned being able to get a kicker late. You look at some of the teams who a lot of people are saying these are going to be good offenses. Dallas, now that Romo's back, they got Zeke Elliott from Ohio State, Des Bryant's healthy. A lot of people were touting them. But you look at their kicker, he's going like 10th, 11th, 12th kicker taken. Pittsburgh. Okay, we all hate Pittsburgh for obvious reasons, but you look at their offense, everyone's saying, oh, they're going to have this wonderful offense. Chris Boswell isn't going in the top 5 or 6. And so you can get good values. You can really get those kickers who, if you sit and wait, just don't do anything stupid. You're not going to grab Washington's kicker. You're not going to grab the Rams kick. There's certain things you're just not going to do. But now, if you're in one of these leagues where people draft backup kickers for some strange reason, then okay, throw everything I said out the window.
Play in a new league. That's what you need to do.
Exactly.
And also, just a quick story today, humble brag, but I was at Chargers practice and I was operating this tent, and before we were at the tent, there were players from the Cardinals there. And I saw this cleat on the ground that looks like a kid's cleat, and I was trying to figure out whose cleats are these. And then, what do you know, I see Chandler Catanzaro walking around looking for something, happens to be the Cardinals kicker, and we were like, what are you looking for, Chandler? He's like, oh, I left shoes over here somewhere. It legitimately looks like kids' shoes. I mean, those kickers is crazy. They step their foot into a shoe that's like probably a size 5. It's crazy.
All right. Well, good stuff, Scott. That is the Fantasy Football Insider, courtesy of the Orange and Black Insider podcast. If you are taking Scott's advice, we would love to hear some feedback in how your draft goes and how your season goes based on his advice, and it is sage advice. To your guys' point, the Bengals defense and special teams has been a pretty solid get, and you can get them late in a lot of drafts. I've noticed that, and it is a bit of a roll of the dice with some of those units. But Scott, good stuff as always this week, and that is the Fantasy Football Insider segment of the Orange and Black Insider podcast.